It's out of juice. I have to recharge it. Now pay attention. Ah, green! Wow. I know, right? Woo!
Hello everyone, this is Beacon Entertainment and we are back again, and here now we have another video for you, and we're going to take a look back at the live action Green Lantern movie from 2011 and ask exactly why it failed in not having an impact and success within the superhero genre. So when looking at the movie, we go back to the movie release date of June the 17th, 2011, where it stars Ryan Reynolds in the lead role alongside Blake Lively, Tim Roberts, Mark Strong, Peter Sarsgaard, Angela Bassett, and it was directed by Martin Campbell. The movie, of course, was the first live-action movie adaptation of the famous DC character who was created way back in 1940, with the first iteration of the character being Alan Scott. The whole concept back then was a Green Lantern who was originally an engineer who went on to fight criminals aided by a magic ring. In 1959, the Green Lantern was reinvented into a much more of a science fiction story where on a planet called Oa, there existed beings known as the Guardians, who created an intergalactic group known as the Green Lantern Corps, who would survey the different sectors of the universe, protecting it from forces of evil. They do it with the power of the rings, which are fueled by the power of will. And the movie very much follows this concept, centering on the most renowned iteration of Green Lantern, the test army pilot Hal Jordan, who we see in the early parts of the story clashing with his superiors, being burdened by the legacy of his father who was also a pilot. Hal's life changes forever when he discovers a member of the Lantern Corps named Abin Sur, who has crash-landed on Earth. In his final dying moments, Abin Sur tells Hal of the legend of the Green Lantern Corps, and Hal then finds himself selected to be the wielder of Abin Sur's power ring and be anointed as a new member of the Lantern Corps. He goes on to visit the planet Oa and discovers the existence of the Corps and discovers the existence of the Guardians and learns of their current battle against the sinister force known as the Parallax. Now, the Parallax exploits the fear of each individual and draws on its power from their paranoia and lack of will. We then see on planet Earth scientist Hector Hammond become infected with a piece of the Parallax which was located within Abin Sur's body when the government acquired it for testing. Whilst himself gaining powers, Hammond also becomes disfigured and mentally unstable. Eventually, Hal has to confront Hammond and also face up to the real threat of the Parallax as it finally threatens planet Earth. Now, when looking back on Green Lantern, it's definitely nowhere near the worst superhero movie ever. There are plenty of movies both before and post its release that are way more inferior. But this is a superhero movie that doesn't fully utilise the appeal and potential of its concept and its source material. Instead of tapping into the more interesting elements, it opts more to play it safe as a much more standard superhero story, and this is where the film does the source material a disservice. As what's really special about the Green Lantern character and concept is that it's not really a standard superhero story. This is not a typical costumed crime fighter who puts on his iconic makeup and then goes out and saves criminals. The whole elements concerning planet Oa, the Guardians and the Power Rings and different factions in space has so much more compelling parts to it, and the movie didn't really embrace enough of the source material. Now, in fairness, the movie starts off quite fine, as we are introduced to Hal and we see how he finds Abin Sur and gets the power ring and discovers the Guardians. And I really liked the segment of Hal seeing Oa for the first time and getting his training from both the likes of Kilowog and Temura. Now, the movie has faced criticism for a lot of the CGI and how the Green Lantern costume was almost much more like a body paint construct rather than an actual piece of armour. But I actually liked the idea of the essence of the power ring consuming the body of an individual, like there's something more intrinsic about the power energy that surrounds the person who wields the ring. I thought that was quite a neat concept that they introduced. I also liked how they gave distinctive looks for the likes of Temura and Kilowog, who end up being two of the mentors of Hal, and these are characters that we really should have seen more of throughout the movie. I also like the rendition of Sinestro, very much tying into how the comic book character was presented as well. Now, ideally, it would have been better using more practical and prosthetics in terms of the makeup of the characters rather than a CGI, of which the work wasn't really too great throughout this film, and I do believe the movie would have been at its more strongest had it stayed focused on the lanterns and the parallax, and potentially this could have been something really good. But the movie rushes through all of these elements to become much more of a standard superhero story as mentioned before, and once it focuses on the Earth-based narrative with Hector Hammond, this is where the story and the film starts to fall apart. This is where really the filmmakers went for a much more generic, almost Spider-Man-like narrative. We have the tortured romance between Hal and Carol, very much like what we saw with Peter Parker and Mary Jane. The Hammond character, who is very angst-ridden and bemoaning the lack of attention from his father, who is Robert Hammond, the United States Senator, gives clear echoes of what we see normally with both Harry and Norman Osborn. And it's a narrative that's A, the least interesting, and B, the one that the movie doesn't need. And the film reaches a point where it doesn't quite know where it's heading in terms of juggling both the narratives of the story of the Lanterns and Hector Hammond together as it goes towards its final conclusion. And it ends up just being underwhelming the more it carries on. It goes for a very lazy universal threat climax, and this is where we have to talk about the notoriously bad effects and handling of the parallax. Again, so much more could have been done with this idea. Yet we get this crudely mishandled grey cloud octopus-like construct, a clear indication of the filmmakers being too scared and not convinced enough in showing the parallax as per the source material. We had a similar case with the second Fantastic Four movie, Rise of the Silver Surfer, where Galactus was shown as this giant misty cloud, and it's one of those elements that really disappointed and annoyed original hardcore fans, again at not utilising the source material. Now in terms of the actors' performances, I don't think there's too many issues. In terms of the cast, Ryan Reynolds is a perfectly suitable pick as Hal Jordan. He's somewhat subdued and muted, playing it far more serious than what we're normally used to seeing from his performances. Blake Lively is superly easy on the eye as Carol Ferris. It's a pretty standard love interest role. I've always felt that Angela Bassett was a great pick as Amanda Waller. Again, she could have been far more used than what this movie does for her character. Now, easily the best performance, as what we'd probably expect throughout the movie, is by Mark Strong as Sinestro. Now in this role, he does bring a lot more presence and gravitas and weight to the overall character. As mentioned, I like the construct very much in keeping with the source material. And I could easily envisage a sequel where we see Sinestro become more corrupted by the Parallax Ring. This was hinted very foolishly at the end credit scene, and I think Mark Strong could have done great things throughout that role. And it's yet another example of what could have been very much like the movie itself. So we'll go on to the movie's overall release, and yes, it gained very much an infamy for being a big massive disappointment. Only grossing $220 million from a near massive $200 million budget. Easily one of the biggest flops not only of the year, but also of the decade. Many fans just felt that the movie was much more of a disservice towards the source material, that we didn't see enough of the Lanterns and Planet Oa. Many criticised the overuse of CGI, and whilst the Green Lantern movie you would require a certain use of CGI, they definitely could have used far more practical work throughout the story. Now in terms of DC and the comic book superhero genre, Green Lantern really didn't damage the brand too much. Warner Brothers were well on their way already to pushing the new Superman story with Man of Steel 2 years later. That in itself was also treated as a more standalone story. And Green Lantern more than anything else represents a missed opportunity as the first live action adaptation of the character, something that's all too common with both Warner Brothers and DC, as what we saw with their failure in terms of bringing the DC characters to life with their DC cinematic universe. Now for a much more superior take on Green Lantern, I highly recommend the animated movie Green Lantern First Flight from 2009. That did Green Lantern much more right in getting Hal's origin in terms of finding the power ring out of the way in the first 5 minutes, before setting the rest of the adventure and story in space. Very much like what we saw with the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and those films were at a time when Marvel felt far more confident to take that approach. And perhaps if Green Lantern was released 5 years later, we could have got something far more in keeping with the source material. But as it stands, Green Lantern from 2011 just wasn't that great adventure that the character very much deserved. Sadly, it was very much a Green Lantern that didn't shine most brightly. So those are my overall thoughts and feelings and look back on Green Lantern from 2011. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and if you have any other suggestions regarding any other movies, television series, or any other topics within the pop, entertainment and culture scene that you'd also like to see me cover, then let me know within the comments and I will see if I can provide that content for you within the channel within the future. Please also hit and like the subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves and I will see you very, very soon.